All right, ladies and gentlemen, for this video, we're going to begin our tour of the body systems. And we're going to start our tour of the body systems with the digestive system. So the first and most important thing to realize is why we have this body system. Body systems are collections of organs and tissues that together allow an organism to complete a certain task that is necessary for survival. All of the body systems work together in an effort to make sure that that survival happens, but each system has a role in the overall process. So, for starters, with the digestive system, the purpose is twofold. First, it's to break down food into its pieces, and the pieces that food gets broken down to are called nutrients. And the way that we do this is through two processes: mechanical and chemical digestion. Now, mechanical digestion is digestion that involves physically destroying the food. And those are things like chewing or your stomach churning. Chemical digestion involves enzymes breaking down the macromolecules in the food into their smaller pieces. Now, the reason we need to do this is because human beings, as well as most mammals, are what we call bulk feeders. They eat food in large chunks, and they have a system that's designed to break it down prior to getting the nutrients out of it. Now, which, of course, leads us to the second purpose of the digestive system, is once the food is broken down into its nutrients, those nutrients have to be extracted from the food so they can be used by the cells. And there's two types of nutrients, broadly. Obviously, there's a lot of details, but broadly, nutrients fall into one of two categories. Either fuel nutrients, things like carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, those organic macromolecules we discussed. And you need those as building blocks for your own carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, but you also need them for energy, okay? And then you also have regulatory nutrients, which are things like vitamins and minerals and, quite frankly, water. And regulatory nutrients are nutrients that aid your body in performing the chemical reactions that must happen. Vitamins and minerals are actually generally stuff like coenzymes, or they're just necessary reactants for your reactions. And water is basically the solution that all your chemical reactions happen in. So the purpose of the digestive system is to break down food into its pieces and to extract nutrients from that digested food for use by cells. So what we want to do now is sort of take a quick tour through the different places of the digestive system. And what we want to do while we take this tour is to think about what each place does for us, and also what type of digestion happens in each place. Okay? So let's start this tour with the mouth. Okay? So the mouth, obviously, is the place where food enters the body. In the mouth, you have mechanical digestion, and you actually also have chemical digestion. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's nowhere that is just... All right, that should say digestion. I'm pretty sure there's nowhere that's just mechanical digestion. All right. You usually have chemical and mechanical working together. The mouth, you have an enzyme known as salivary amylase that breaks down carbohydrates. And so that's why we have this right here. All right. Carbohydrates begin the breakdown process in your mouth. And that amylase comes from your saliva. All right, so you have your salivary glands, which are in the base of your mouth, which secrete your saliva into your mouth, and that saliva moistens the food so it's easier to chew and break down, but it also has enzymes in it that help start breaking down carbohydrates. Now, from the mouth, you end up with the esophagus. Now, the esophagus is the tube that's from the back of your mouth all the way down to your stomach. Now, the back of your throat is called the pharynx, and that's where like your windpipe and your esophagus and your mouth and your nasal passages meet. But the reality is that what we mostly care about is that once that food begins the digestive process in your mouth and you've digested it enough, you push it with your tongue into your esophagus. Now, it's a common misconception that the esophagus actually just lets things drop into the stomach, but the esophagus is actually a muscle that actually pushes the partially digested food into the stomach. And the process that does that is known as peristalsis. All right, so that pushes food down into the stomach. Now, once it's into the stomach, there's a whole lot of stuff going on. All right. First thing, that in the stomach, you have, again, mechanical and still chemical digestion going on. Because what happens is your stomach is actually like squeezing and pushing and churning the chewed food that's in your stomach, but it also is producing enzymes and acid that chemically starts to destroy that food even further. Okay. Now, once this food leaves the stomach, it moves into the small intestine. But right as it enters the small intestine, some cool things happen. Your pancreas actually injects some chemicals into it known as lipases. All right. And that's chemical digestion again. All right. So that's occurring in your small intestine. And those lipases help break down fat. But at the same time that's happening, your liver has made bile, and that bile ends up in your gallbladder. And at the appropriate time, the gallbladder basically just squeezes and shoots the bile into your small intestine. And that bile and those lipases, those fat breaking down enzymes, they finish the digestion job. They sort of clean up any carbs that are left, and they start to break down those fats. All right. And so what you see here is that carbohydrates are broken down in the mouth and the small intestine. Proteins are broken down in the stomach, and fats are broken down in the small intestine. Now, that's not the only place any of them are broken down, but the majority of the breakdown happens there. Okay? Now, I'm just going to really reveal this for now. So I understand this is a lot to look at. So just sort of like take it in one piece at a time. So what happens here is the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder all help some digestion in the small intestine. And then once that's done, the small intestine changes jobs. And you'll notice the small intestine is actually this. It's actually the longer of the intestines. The reason we call it small is because it's the smaller tube. It's like thinner. All right. So what happens is inside the small intestine, the very top of it, like right when it meets the stomach, you have all that digestion happening. And then all that stuff starts flowing through the small intestine, and the small intestine begins the process of absorption. And that's when you actually start getting those nutrients you've digested out of the food. And those nutrients actually end up in your blood. All right. And so they go all the way through the small intestine, and then they end up in the large intestine. And the large intestine also goes by the name colon. So the large intestine, or the colon, actually starts absorbing water from that digested food. Because think about it, there's water in your stomach from the acid, there's water in your small intestines, there's water in your mouth from when you swallow, you drink a lot of water. So there's a lot of water in that food, and your body doesn't want it to go to waste. So in the large intestine, your body is making sure that you have the right amount of water in your waste. Because what you're doing at this point is you're really only getting water and some vitamins and minerals out of it. You're not really getting any other nutrients. So you're really just making sure that it has the right consistency and that you're not wasting water. And that's the majority of what the large intestine does. The large intestine absorbs water to make sure that you have the right amount to keep balance. And the large intestine helps extract vitamins and minerals out of your waste. And then the food that's left starts traveling through the large intestine, and it ends up at your rectum and your anus. And it's at that point that you sort of hold on to it, because it would be very inconvenient for you to just be releasing waste product whenever it gets there. And so, we have a system designed where you flex a muscle basically all day long, called the anal sphincter, and that muscle stays flexed. And then when it feels too much pressure, it starts sending signals to your brain that's like, hey, we got to empty it out. We got too much waiting. And then that's what you do. You find a place, you release that leftover undigested food, which is called defecation, and that undigested food is called feces, and then the process continues. Now, one thing to consider about the digestive system It's actually one long tube. You go from mouth to the esophagus, to the stomach, to the small intestine. You jump around in there for a while. Then you go into the large intestine, and then you stop at the anus till it's time to get out, and then you're out. So it's one long tube that just sort of passes through the middle of your body. And the beginning parts of it are mostly about breaking down what you're taking in so that you can get what you need out of it. And then once you get to that small intestine, it's all about extracting those nutrients from the food and getting it into your bloodstream. All right? So those are the basics of the digestive system.